a couple of big superstars for you.
Yes.
Do you know who we have? I'm going to make you wait. So why don't we get right to it? Can we please have Kaskade and Steve Aoki? The Grammys for hosting this, and thank you Lizzie and Daniel and Aaron and all of the staff behind this. I mean, what a great turnout, and thank you all for coming. So I guess the first question to both of you is, did you choose to do this, and what was the path, the journey, as from before, you both earned the title of superstar DJs and producers, so how did you get there? What kind of influences and music were you listening to get there? Why don't we start with you, Steve?
Microphone. Well, I grew up listening to straight edge hardcore, and when I was in my tweens, and that, being part of that community lended a lot of tools as far as being in a band and learning how to play guitar, singing horribly, the whole band spirit of just, a group think, always getting together with your friends and playing music. So I grew up in that kind of unconventional world of I don't know if you can call it songwriting, but that's what it was. And eventually I started a label in my when I was 19, when I was going to college, and I was still in bands. And I started DJing when I moved to LA, and I should, it's better. And then when I moved to LA, then I got into production for dance music. Like a couple years after I started DJing. So in like '05, I started remixing, and that was really the start for me to get into dance music. Was having the stems of bands on my label, the first of which was Block Party, and I remixed one of the songs, Helicopter, with a friend of mine that already knew how to produce music in Pro Tools. So he kind of schooled me at that time as far as the technical aspect of producing. I was there just songwriting with him, and then over the course of a couple of years, I started producing on my own, and then eventually started working on this album that just came out this year, which took like 3 or 4 years to eventually finish, and then, long story short, it's...
I was born in Evanston, which is a suburb right outside of Chicago, and for those of you
Anyone else out from near there?
Yeah, a few Midwesterners here, the Chicago people, what's up, Columbia, so.
Yeah, you know what, hello to the online community.
Yeah, so in the 80s, when I was in high school, and this new music was emerging, this new genre, it was actually quite accessible. They had radio shows, specialty shows. WBMX was a R&B station that had, or like a pop station that had house mixes on the weekend. And teen clubs were a big deal back in the 80s. I don't even know if they still do that now. I guess we go to raves now instead of clubs. But back then, it was very common. So I'd take the train into the city, hitch a ride with my friends, whatever. This is before I started driving, and go into the city and listen to what these guys were doing. And soon after that, I was intrigued instantly. I was like, oh man, this is, I got it, I understood what they were doing, but the music was different than anything I'd ever heard.
So were you listening to, like Steve was obviously listening to a lot of different music, did you just know dance music was your thing, or were you listening to some other stuff?
No, I had 2 older brothers, so I grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and The Who, But they had good taste in music. They went to college and they came back and they brought the Smiths and The Cure and New Order, and I got turned on to that stuff really early. And then there was that kind of weird crossover moment with house music where Art of Noise was making records, and Kraftwerk, they were making records that the tempo was very similar to house music. And the DJs in Chicago were blending this stuff with early house records and acid house records. And I was just intrigued. The whole scene was very inviting, and I was a music lover.
Right.
And I just kind of like dove it right in from there. And
So you were with vinyl back then, or?
yeah, it was vinyl. The arguably one of the first dance music record stores, Gramophone, was not too far from where the club that I was going to was at. So I was hanging out in the city, going to this club, and then buying records, you know, with, I mean, back then, I'm laughing because kids complain now about buying an MP3 for $1.99. Back then, a domestic record was $4.99, and an import was $8.99 or $9.99. So it was, for somebody in high school, this is a lot of money when I only got, you know, 20, 30 bucks a week, so.
And of course, you were probably having to carry very heavy boxes of vinyl to your gigs, right?
Well, I wasn't gigging in high school. I was just buying this stuff.
Okay.
And back then, you know, my parents had a record player because this is what vinyl was still like the format that you bought music on. I can remember like, oh man, no, cassettes are cool. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that, man. I'm not into cassettes.
Well, I started as a duo called Weird Science. That's how I got into production. And as I was saying before, I really learned a lot from my production partner, our partner at the time, Blake Miller. And then I later got into my own production. But I feel like I started maturing more as a producer when I started working with other producers and learning, you know, their different ways of you know, looking at a song structure. You know, their different sample banks. It's just different like mind frames of producing music. You know, going to the studio with Layback Luke or Afrojack or Tiesto. Like the last couple of collabs I've done have really expanded my you know, the way I've produced.
He's not name dropping there, by the way. He's really doing that.
I was buying these records, crates of records. I wasn't DJing very much. No one would hire me.
Not now.
And then I just started slowly buying pieces of gear, 909 and 808. Bought my first sampler, an Akai S3000. And I started kind of wrapping my head around how people were making these early house records. Because at first I was like, how are they making these sounds? What is that? It's not a drummer. This is a machine making this music. But for me, it made a lot of sense. I was never like a team player. I didn't play on the football team. I was a skateboarder. I was always like the kid in the corner alone. So for me to sit in front of a machine and figure out how it worked with my background in music, I was like, this is something I can really understand. It made sense to me. I'm like, cool, I could be the one-man band. I could sit here with the sampler. I could sit here on this drum machine. I could program for hours and have a good time and call it a night. But those machines I found very difficult. And I remember a big thing for me is when Pro Tools introduced Sound Designer 2. When it was a card that I got in my Mac 7100, this was a big deal back then. I like leveraged every credit card I had to get a 7100 at the student bookstore. It was like $2,000 or something. I was like, I'm going to hell and I'm never going to get out of debt, but I'm going to make records, damn it, you know.
See, there's hope.
But so that's bad. Don't do that.
Don't get into too much debt.
Yeah, don't do that. Sorry, that's a bad story to share.
Can you share with us what your studio looks like now?
Yes. Well, I'll give you a little bit of history because I think it's interesting. And I just moved into a brand new studio, so the timing of this is great. I'm going through this whole like cleansing process. Like, what do I need? What don't I need in here? What am I actually using? For me, in the beginning, was a bunch of boxes: Juno 106, synths, you know, Jupiter, just everything I could get my hands on. Secondhand shops, friends, whatever. So 808, 909, all these different, you know, electronic instruments, kind of stringing them together and syncing it up and recording them. Fast forward. Okay, I moved to San Francisco. This is how the first cleanse went. I moved to San Francisco and I'm like, here's the apartment I can afford, and here's all my gear, And this is at the time that Reason came out. It was like kind of right, coincided with moving to San Francisco. And the stuff, the gear and Reason sounded pretty convincing to me at the time. I was like, man, this is freaking crazy. This 909 and Rebirth sounds, this thing's going for $2,000 on eBay, and like, I can't eat. So
just figure out how to wire the back of it.
Right. So I'm like, maybe I should sell this gear and invest. And I couldn't fit the gear in my apartment. For the first like 4 months I lived in San Francisco, the stuff sat in a storage unit. And so anyway, I tried to convince my wife, like, no, it's cool, we don't need a front room. I could just make this whole place the studio. It'd be awesome. We could sleep under the desk. We get a futon or fold out. But I'll be making records. It'll be cool.
I'm sure she's happy that you did that.
Anyway, I sold a lot of that stuff and kind of got into the more digital side of things. And now, I mean, I just gave my tower to a friend, and I've actually switched to this next record will be fully done on a laptop. I mean, even though the laptop will be plugged into a Pro Tools system, I'll get the processing of that. I mean, just the power of the personal computer has completely changed it. I mean, I'm sad. I love the vintage stuff. Don't get me wrong. I still have a Rhodes sitting in my studio. I really want the real thing, but call a friend over, he brings it over.
So, you know, if you are moving towards a laptop, what's the main, you know, DAW? What's the main system that you're? Is it Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools?
I'm a Pro Tools guy, and I've stuck with Pro Tools. I like to hear that. That makes me very happy. And the 10 years that I was in San Francisco is awesome because I drive down to Daly City and like throw high fives with all the guys at the office there and be like, "What's up, man? I use your gear all the time. Can I get some plugins?"
See, this is how it works.